Here's your materials list. I always do a video because different products can be called different things all around the world. If you have any problems finding the materials, then drop me an email and I will see if I can find what you need wherever you live. And if I can't find it, I have students in Australia, in the United States, and all across Europe. So between us, we should be able to find what you need. But hopefully most things are available, certainly on the internet, even if you can't get to your local craft store. First of all, we're going to need Decaville. This is an interfacing with an iron-on surface on one side. So if you think of it as an interfacing with Bonder web on, then you'd be in the right direction. The great thing about Decaville is it feels like leather. It's absolutely brilliant. It's made by Vliseline and it's used for making bags generally. Because you can iron your fabric on, cut to shape, stitch it on the machine, and it's absolutely perfect. It's brilliant. But there are so many other things you can do, as with most of the Vliseline products. So the Decaville one light is quite light. It's kind of like a medium weight interfacing, if you want to call it that. But it is just fabulous. You can just see how I'm folding it up and moving it around. You can't really use it for tall textiles or large boxes, the Decaville Light, but it's very, very useful for book covers particularly, which I'll show you. There's also the Decaville One, which is the original Decaville, which is a heavier one. It's about twice the weight of the Decaville Light. And this is quite sturdy. This would stand up and make some rather splendid vessels. Thicker book covers and larger boxes. And again, it has the wonderful glue on one side, which you can iron fabric onto, transfer foil, all the gorgeous sparkly things that I use. So I absolutely adore this product because not only can you decorate it, but you can also make it 3D. You'll need some kind of acrylic paint. Acrylic will dry to waterproof stage. Good old basic acrylics. You'll also need a paintbrush or a sponge and a jug for water. Probably an apron as well, if you're anything like me with acrylic paint. And while we're talking about being messy with acrylic paint, I would recommend that you have at least kitchen roll on your table, if not baby wipes as well. I find baby wipes absolutely crucial in the studio, any time of day or night. Particularly when I'm working with paint, and they're very good for cleaning your printing blocks as well. So always have some nice fresh baby wipes to hand. If you want to print onto your book cover or your box, because these processes are totally interchangeable, you just make your decorated piece of Decaville and then you decide how you're going to cut it, whether it's going to be a box or a book cover. The decoration is very much the same for both processes. So for printing, you can use any little pre-made blocks that you have. These are a couple from India when I was traveling. Or you can use your homemade printing blocks or anything that you have lurking around. I would recommend that you have a little tin or something to put your paint into, and some kind of sponge is what I would use. You can use these washing up sponges, or you can cut up a car wash sponge, the really big ones. You can cut those with scissors and make lots of smaller sponges that you must wash when you've finished with and not leave them to go hard in your studio. To decorate your book cover or your box, I'm going to give you a list of all kinds of things. You do not have to use them all at once. I'm just going to show you some of the ideas that you might like to try when you sample before you make a finished piece. Sampling is quite important sometimes, just to see if it's too thick to stick, what colours go well together, or just the actual process of applying the media. So you might have a few little elements that you have left over from the Now You See It workshop, where we made little extra separate elements to put onto your work, whether you're making silk paper bowls, machine embroidered bowls, or a book cover, or a box. You can use all kinds of papers, newspapers. I'm particularly fond of Japanese ledgers at the moment. But whatever you can find, magazine covers, you can do cut out shapes and faces. You could use photographs and iron them on. There are lots of ways of working with paper. Oh, this matches my top. You can use little slivers of polyester organza If you just cut a strip, roll it up, and then just chop it up into little thin strips and then lay them onto the Decaville, you get lovely little shimmery surfaces. You can also use fabrics that you've space dyed or you've bought, which you can cut, tear, and then iron down onto your Decaville. If you have any lace, that can also look quite pretty too. You can have a random effect on your work, or you can have something quite organized and geometric. Depends what you find is interesting and what your style is. I'm not asking you to copy what I do. I want you to learn the process and do what you do. Of course, if it's sticky, then I would be applying gilding flake, which is flaring nicely in the light. But gilding flake is very thin metal and flies around all over the place. So do keep the lid on at all times. But gilding flake is one of my favourite things for ironing onto anything that's sticky. And also mica flakes, if you can get hold of them. These are the little flakes of mica, which is a naturally occurring mineral. And it's been dyed all different kind of shades. You can get all kinds of colours and things. Transfer foil is another favourite of mine. This is not gift wrap, it's transfer foil. It's heat transfer, and wherever you apply the heat, it will stick to the glue on the Decaville, so you can get lovely flashes of colour. Once you've printed onto your book cover or your box, and before you put them together and stitch them together, you might want to machine stitch or hand stitch into your work. So you can machine stitch with obviously machine stitching thread. I also use this for hand stitching as well. I find that quite useful. But there are obviously lots of other yarns that you can use and threads. So there's some stranded thread, there's some weaving thread. I'm sure you all have all kinds of threads and yarns in your stash. So there's lots of different textures, surfaces that you can stitch with. They're great fun. While we're talking about threads, you can also use these eyelash yarns, which are great fun, just to iron down onto your work. They give a lovely fluffy effect. I quite love them. They're a little in your face sometimes, but if they're the right colour to blend in with your work, then they work very well for texture. If you're making a book cover, you will need a book. When you measure your book, and I will stress this, please make sure that you physically wrap the Decaville around your book so that you know how much ease you need when you close the book. You'll understand when you do it yourself, because it kind of slips and moves into place. You really do need to make sure that you have enough left for your flaps on either side, because once you've got your flaps, you will then stitch them in place along here so that your book cover will slip in nicely. So as I say, I will stress this all the way through the workshop, because there's nothing more annoying than do a lovely piece and then you close the book and you realise that you've got the tiniest little bit left for slipping the book cover in. If you create a piece that's too big or too wide, then you can always chop the end off and make a little bookmark to match your book. You will need an iron. You can use a craft iron, but I find a proper iron is the best thing because it's quicker and more efficient. Off steam and on hot, or as hot as your fabric will take it. And as always, rolls and rolls of baking parchment when you're working with any kind of fusible web or glue. You just can't have enough of this stuff. When you're cutting your Decaville, and you do need to have nice, neat edges. I'm not always neat, but when I'm cutting Decaville, I like to have a nice sharp edge. Do use a proper ruler with a good knife. When you're working with a knife or a scalpel or a rotary cutter, make sure you've got a good edge to cut against. I don't use quilting squares and things like that. I tend to use metal rulers to cut against. But do make sure that your fingers are well away from the blades that you're using. I know that you know this, but it doesn't hurt to remind you. There are various blades that you can use to cut Decaville. You can cut it very easily with scissors, but if you want something quite accurate and sharp, it's quite nice to cut it with a knife. So I'm quite fond of these little knives that you can get, these little ergonomic knives that you can get to cut with a reasonable blade inside, because it protects your fingers. My main weapon of choice is always a Swan Norton scalpel. I use retractable ones because there is nothing more dangerous than a naked blade on your table, especially when you work like I do in a nest and you have this blade loose on your table. These blades are very sharp. They are made to cut through skin down to the bone by doctors. But and I need to tell you that because obviously with health and safety advice with knives, it's very important. But it also means they cut fantastic edges. So if you can, find a retractable Swan Norton scalpel. They're available all over the internet. And they even have a blue one, which is nice. They're usually steel coloured. So do use a good sharp knife or rotary cutter for cutting your Decaville. As I said, you can use scissors to cut your Decaville. You will need scissors for this workshop, but don't use your best ones. Yeah, just have some kind of half decent, but not your best ones lurking around on your table. And while we're talking about cutting, there are many ways of cutting fabrics and media now. There are an awful lot more electric machines that you can have talking to your computer that can cut shapes, or you can use good old-fashioned die cutting machines, which is what I have. I have various large forms, and this is one of the die cut box shapes, which I'm going to decorate and then put together to show you. This one's made with the Decaville 1, the slightly heavier interfacing, because I find that better for boxes. So I've already painted this pink, but if you want a really nice sharp box, then either find a template, there are many all over the internet, and there's probably some that you can download, or you can design your own. But do make sure they have nice sharp cut edges. When we finish off our work, before we put it together or stitching the slip cover on the book, I use either golden gel medium or acrylic wax as a varnish. I find it's the best thing. They're archival, they don't yellow. I know they're more expensive than PVA, but I would never use PVA on my work, particularly if I sell it. And the gel medium also makes a very good glue as well. As I say, it doesn't yellow and it's archival. So these are the kind of things that I would use, but obviously you can use what you want to.